All right, our next presenter is an anthropologist, primatologist, comedian, and writer. She was a co-host on Spike TV's $10 Million Bigfoot Bounty and an animal expert on Nat Geo Wild's Everything You Didn't Know About Animals. I should talk to her about my cat dilemma. This will be good. She is a producer of the web series Talkin' Shit with Dr. Todd and Natalia, and she has done science videos covering topics from understanding race and sexuality to the evolution of boobs. I think mine are still evolving. I have very high hopes. Her goal, and I love this, her goal is to spread science literacy while inducing spit takes. That is awesome. So with us today to talk about the fact that time has always been up, please welcome Natalia Reagan.
So today, I'm going to talk to you about a really fun subject, guys. It's going to be a little bumpy ride. It's going to be a little uncomfortable. It's a journey. You know, we're going to go on an adventure. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we're dealing with right now in our nation, but we're also going to talk about solutions and why we cannot blame science for bad behavior, because that's just a really easy cop-out, and there's enough data out there to show that biology cannot support why people are jerks. And I don't want this to be just about men, because there are female jerks and jerks of all genders and gender identities. So this is not an attack, but I want this to be a discussion. I want this to continue on the conversation. So, because I feel like that's the only way we're going to have any improvement. And evolution is important in this particular category for me. So the Me Too movement, everyone here is probably familiar with it. I am coming at this as a white, mostly cisgender. I had some when I was a kid, I was very much a tomboy, bisexual, single, mostly single woman. And all these things, all these identities I bring to this discussion. And anybody who has a problem with identity politics, I say this, everything that we do, whether it's the job that we have, the life that we lead, all our identities inform our behavior. So that's something I want you to just think about. And it's not, I don't want identity politics to become a dirty word, or intersectional thinking being a kind of people call it PC. It's like there's nothing wrong with it. We have identities, we need to own them, and that's not a bad thing. So the Me Too movement has called into question the behavior of men throughout history in the film industry. However, this is nothing new. I don't know about you women in the audience. However, I've been on the receiving end of harassment, inappropriate comments, microaggressions, and unfortunately, more sexual assault than I would like to admit. The actual reason why I'm giving this talk here at NECSS is a couple years ago, I was on the receiving end of some harassment from somebody that is no longer part of this organization, and it was dealt with very well. But it was an interesting moment because I remember at the time not knowing what to do. I was being harassed. I didn't know how to react. A friend of mine is the one that stepped in and did something, and it made me, I've never felt, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where someone says something to you and you don't know how to react, and you feel like, you know, at the time I was, 37 years old? It's like you're a big girl. You should say something. You should stand up. You should tell them to fuck off, you know? But I couldn't. And I froze in that moment, and it was like, wait a minute, why are we freezing in this moment? And everybody at this particular party froze in that moment too, because they didn't know what to say. So again, this is something we all need to, I think, talk about. So the Me Too movement, again, calls into question bad behavior of men. Tarana Burke is the leader of the Me Too movement that's often forgotten. She started it in 2006. So what she does, and what she has done, is called into question behavior for several decades, but specifically women of color, because oftentimes women of color are less believed than those of my persuasion. And that, of course, is incredibly problematic. But as we saw with the Harvey Weinstein debacle, there we go. There she is actually leading a march. We saw, Alyssa Milano, Rose McGowan. Let me make sure. Yes, here we go. We got Angelina Jolie. Mira Sorvino basically came out and discovered through Peter Jackson's remarks that basically Harvey Weinstein had blacklisted her. So women's careers absolutely just fell apart because of one man, and not just that man, but all the men and women who hid his transgressions, who supported him, who were willing to stay quiet because they wanted to keep their job. And it's you build this sort of pyramid where everyone's supporting somebody because they all don't want that house of cards to fall, but it is and it will fall. So, but the thing is, what's interesting is this is Asia Argento, who was a big proponent in the Me Too movement, was with Anthony Bourdain, and unfortunately, when he committed suicide in June of this year, many people came out and attacked her. So not only, and Anthony Bourdain was a huge proponent of the women in the Me Too movement. So what was very disappointing and what has come out now is the women that have been hurt by the Me Too movement, including Asia Argento herself, who had been raped by Harvey Weinstein, was now being attacked for the death of her mate, which had nothing to do, I mean, if you're familiar with suicide, it's never somebody else's fault, unless they wouldn't be suicide unless they kill you. So that right there is another way that women are often blamed for behaviors. And so this is an open letter recently in the LA Times from many women in the Me Too movement, basically attacking those trolling Asia Argento. But what I really wanted to get to is that the film industry is not the only field that's being affected by this Me Too movement. I'm an anthropologist, I'm a biological anthropologist. Unfortunately, when I go to conferences, harassment is commonplace. And it's something that you just sort of get used to, unfortunately. You take it on the chin, you buck it up. There's a lot of women that are higher ups in my field, primatologists, bioanthros, forensic anthropologists, who tell me stories of how they had to deal with aggression from males when they were coming up as junior academics. And so, but recently, hold on, there was a Save 13 study. Kate Clancy, Julian Rutherford, Robin Nelson, and Katie Hind basically did a survey. Oh no. Excuse me, pardon me. Cancel. Let's see. Oh, no, it's, there we go. Okay, so they did a survey basically of, because they basically, because we know, if you go to a conference and you're female, at an anthropology conference, you are on the receiving end often, multiple times, if not every day, of some sort of comment, like, oh, you're pretty smirk for a girl. Not quite out that on the nose, but it's pretty close. And so they wanted to do a survey of basically harassment in field schools, because what's really interesting, and I love this about my field of biological anthropology, I'm a primatologist, I actually had to go to primate field school. That exists. You basically go to Costa Rica for a month and learn to chase monkeys and put together a research project, learn how to do behavioral studies. It's fantastic. However, you are living in the wilds of Costa Rica with older, academics that may or may not like younger females. A lot of primatologists, or primatology, the field, attracts a lot of female academics, a lot of undergrads, and so there's a very distinct power dynamic. And they found that a lot of women were reporting not only abuse at field schools, but actually field sites, and also within academies and departments. So, and also what was included was academic bullying. So actual advisors were either coming on to students, or they were having a relationship with students, which of course affects what grants they might get. If you're dating a student even across different institutions and you have to review their grant proposal, it would be smart if you wanted to be ethical to recuse yourself from that situation, but sometimes they don't. And all of a sudden it becomes a very muddy, icky water. And unfortunately, a lot of women reported that they did not go on in the field because they felt threatened. They felt like this is par for the course. They have to sign up for this. And they were like, no, thank you. The world is hard enough. So again, science is not immune to it. And very recently, the American Museum of Natural History, a place that I love dearly, experienced their own very massive Me Too movement, where a female, actually someone I know, was sexually assaulted at a conference, and she immediately reported it to HR. And I remember when she told me about this, because I was so impressed by her, because I know that I, in that moment, would not know what to do. And she was just like, no, nobody does that to me. And I was just floored by her ballsiness. And she reported it, and it took I think a year and a half before he finally was removed from the institution. But she had to work at this institution with this man who sexually assaulted her for over a year. And I mean, she was no longer forced to work with him, but still, I mean, this is what she had to deal with, and this is what a lot of women have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But a lot of times you hear, come on, boys will be boys. I mean, sexual coercion, it's part of biology. Orangutans, they're really rapey. Why not men? I mean, look at Trump. He looks like an orangutan. He grabs him by the you know what. Like, people just make these excuses. And sure, boys will be boys, but you cannot blame biology for your dick behavior. You know, you have to blame yourself, because quite honestly, it's not biology. And so what we're seeing now is this sort of backlash of, you know, with the incels coming out and violence against women being blamed on, well, you know, men are not getting the proper redistribution of sex, and we need to have, you know, if these men had like regular sex, they would not be doing this sort of behavior. They wouldn't be, you know, mowing down people in the streets or assaulting women or any sort of abuse, and it's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. It is completely lifting all responsibility from the perpetrators and putting all the blame on the victims. And this is something that, as women, we deal with every day. I don't know about you, but like every day I feel some sort, and it's so ingrained, and we're going to get to why this is, why I think it is. It's so ingrained in us to feel a sort of shame. And again, I know this is a skeptic conference. I'm going to talk a lot more about feelings than I normally ever would at a scientific or skeptics conference, because this right here, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff cannot be put into quantitative data. We're going to get to stats, but a lot of this also is qualitative data. It is actually feelings that exist that you cannot just wipe away. They exist, and they need to be spoken about. So I'm a big fan of believing that men, certainly not from Mars, women are not from Venus. We're far more similar than different as a species. You know what I mean? We really aren't that different. We want two things in life: food and sex. We want resources. And people question how much we want each thing. And they're finding more and more that women are not as prudish and coy as we'd like to think. You know, they actually have desires. And there's been books being written right now even about female infidelity and how common it is, and how it's not the men that are like, oh, I gotta spread my seed, and women are like, oh no, I just want to have one man for the rest of my life. No, we like a little variety too. So that's something that we need to talk about. So why do people still believe this sort of evolutionary psychology flim-flam, sometimes I call it? Well, basically, so historically, if you think about it, who does the science? That really informs the science. And in the past, a lot of the science being done on gender and even sexuality and the spectrum of gender was done by white men. So their male gaze was very much infused in the science they were producing. And so now that we're seeing more women entering the field, we're seeing their research questions, their methodologies sort of shake things up, and we're getting new results. And this is what I think is great about science. And I'm a big proponent, actually, of diversity in our field, specifically biological anthropology, because for a field that studies human variation, there's very little variation and diversity in our field, and that's a big problem. So that's a little another something. But women and people of color, those of marginalized communities, LGBTQ researchers are incredibly important in the field of biological anthropology. But also, I just think that essentialist thinking is a cop-out, blaming biology, blaming just sort of essentialist ideas, and then, of course, reductionist evolutionary psychology, flim-flam, as I like to call it. So some of the BS that's, I mean, in Darwin, I like Darwin. Who doesn't like Darwin? I mean, Darwin was pretty great, but Darwin also had some very 1859 ideas, you know? You couldn't really take him out of his environment. And so he basically, you know, women are evolved to choose mates that, you know, they have to be more prudent, and males are like, well, you know, I'll just take her, you know, whatever. And then more recently, Dr. Tim Hunt, I'm sure you remember this one. I'm going to read it because I just love this quote. 3 things happen when women, are in the lab. You fall in love with them, they fall in love with you, and when you criticize them, they cry. Yeah, okay, cool. Thanks, Tim Hunt. And yeah, I actually, you know, I can relate to that because I do cry very easily. If anybody wants to insult me after this talk, you might see me cry. But you know, it's fine. I cry easily. But That doesn't mean I'm weak, don't take that for weakness. But that spawned, that particular tweet spawned, these are my distractingly sexy tweets. So all these women scientists came back and were like, well, okay, Tim Hunt, you think we're distractingly sexy? Like let's give you some ammunition. And so this is me being distractingly sexy in Costa Rica, doing field work, and then playing Bigfoot, because nothing says sex appeal like big hairy feet. Yeah, so, but why do humans like to just sort of make everything black or white? Humans love to compartmentalize. We like to put things in boxes. It's easy for us to do. It's something that, it helps us just sort of make sense of the world, honestly. Compartmentalizing, it's a way to cope, I think, in a very overwhelming world. And so we see things as, male, female. We see things as good versus evil. I love this image. Jesus is so determined to kill Satan. I've never seen an arm wrestling match. I love that image. We see things as, oh, I didn't know that did all these, oh. We see things as white. Come on. Pancakes or waffles? Which one do you guys like? Okay. Well, you know what the correct answer is? Tacos. You guys got it all wrong. No gold stars for you. Well, but surprise! Gender isn't binary. That didn't go as well as I thought. Excuse me, guys. I was like, those transitions are going to be so cool. No, they really weren't. But gender isn't binary. It's a spectrum. And so all these things that we like to think about, males and females, males being more promiscuous than females, male being more aggressive than females, all these things, fit into a spectrum. There's not, it's not as black and white as we like to believe. And we know this through a lot of anthropological studies of even tribal nations or tribal groups in South America that are historically very violent. The idea would be like, well, the more violent males, the more aggressive ones probably have more kids. That's the evolutionary advantage of being more violent. And they actually have done studies and found, no, they actually had less kids. Didn't work out for them. So, and even chimps, being aggressive can only get you so far, because chimps will put other chimps in kind of a smackdown mode if they behave too unruly and too crappy. Like an alpha male that's a total jerk usually gets overthrown and maybe eaten. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a good way to start my Sunday. So, but what are we ignoring when we talk about all these things about males and females and really looking at humans as just a strictly biological species? We are forgetting the fact that humans are a cultural species. Culture plays a huge role in who we are and how we became the way we are. And so I feel like with the Me Too movement, understanding that biologically we're not that different, and we're going to get into more of that in a little bit, but we're also very much informed by our environment, our culture. Certain parts of the world have certain ways of doing things, same with the United States. And we have very interesting ways of doing things, but I'm going to cover some of the, they're called my 4 Bs, so all the things that I think are interesting are the 4 Bs. We've got biology, brains, behavior, and boning. So in terms of biology, there are some distinct differences that we can't ignore, that males have more testosterone than some females do, but males and females both have estrogen and testosterone. Males have narrower pelvises, females have wider ones. Why? We gotta give birth to a really big-headed baby. I already talked about the hormone levels, but and sexual dimorphism, there's not a huge amount of difference between male and female size. So that also is interesting, because when you see a lot of aggression in other non-human primates, usually there's more sexual dimorphism in terms of like the males are really big, like a 400-pound gorilla and a 200-pound female gorilla, or 250-pound. I don't know about you, but like you look at males and females across the globe, human males and females, we are far more similar in size than we are disparate. And that actually sort of pushes us into believing that we are a little bit more cooperative and more prone to things like monogamy. And when I say that, because the primates, I just want to correct myself. When I say that, the primates that are, have no size difference in between them, like gibbons, they're monogamish. I should make that clear. They actually do like mate for life, but with extra pair copulations on the side when the other one's not looking. But that's just fun. So I want to talk to you about just even like the biology of our bits, our junk. Very similar, if you look at it, we've got, the ovum, you got the ovaries and you got the testes, very similar. You got, obviously, the penis and the vagina, which fits very well together. But if we go in a little closer, this right here is the female anatomy. And if you look even closer, oh, that got moved, but that's the clitoris. So they both actually look very similar. Obviously, let's see, you can't see the penis very well, but yeah. The clit and the penis are very, very similar in even their morphology. So we are very similar in terms of biology. Brains, the more that they study about brain biology, neuroscientists can't even tell, like when they're doing a autopsy, they can't tell the difference between a male and female brain. Even the differences in terms of cognition at an early age, they're finding that children do basically just as well at math at an early age, which really calls into question, why do we have this as an innate assumption that males are more apt to go into the math and the STEM fields? Again, that's when culture plays a part in all of this. When you're told very early on, as many of you probably have when you were growing up, I don't want to speak for all of you, but I know that when I was growing up, it was math and science was very much pushed on the boys and not so much on the girls. It was definitely gendered. And so they're finding now that there are actually not very many differences in terms of aptitude for math and science at an early age. Oh yeah, okay, and one of my favorite studies has also been looking at just the brain in terms of cooperation. A lot of times it's easy to say, well, humans, non-human primates, super aggressive, and they're all fueled by competition. But there's a lot more evidence to point that we are a highly social species, clearly. We're all hanging out here on a Sunday morning instead of just sitting in our apartments by ourselves. We chose to do this together. But we also cooperate so much more than compete. If you think about the city of New York, if we were all competing to the nth degree, this would not be a well-running city. We'd all be falling apart. We'd all be in warring factions and killing each other. So there's a lot of evidence to point that we're more cooperative. I'm going to get to a study that Robert Sapolsky, who is a neuroscientist out of Stanford, did with baboons in Kenya that actually showed the plasticity of primate behavior in a little bit, which I think is very interesting because I do think what we're dealing with in terms of the Me Too movement is we have a great opportunity to evolve into a more kinder, compassionate culture that will call out bad behavior and keep people in check because humans are plastic, primates are plastic. We have the ability to change quickly. Cultural evolution happens a lot faster than biological evolution. And, oh, here we go, this is the study, sorry. So basically, Robert Sapolsky studied a group of baboons. I highly recommend the book A Primate's Memoir. It is actually what inspired me to become a primatologist. He studied a group of baboons in Kenya. He gave them all great Old Testament names, Nebuchadnezzar, Benjamin, Noah, and they, the big alpha males. And oh yeah, baboons have a very hierarchical structure, alpha male, beta. He's done great studies about looking at the cortisol levels of alpha and beta and who's most stressed, and he found that the alpha was most stressed and the one of the lowest on the totem pole because the alpha is always trying to stay on top and the one of the lowest is always trying to get up a rung and getting beat up by the others. So he's done some really great research. However, in a tragic turn of events, basically this group of baboons, all the big males that were willing to risk, doing something dangerous, went and raided a camp and ate all this meat that had been tainted with tuberculosis. And one by one, all his beloved baboons, including Benjamin, who he loved so much, it's a great book, died. And it broke his heart. But what was really interesting that came out of this study is instead of the lowest on the totem pole coming up and going like, okay, it's my turn, I'm going to fight my way to be alpha, they all just chilled out. All of them just chilled out. They just were like, they almost became an egalitarian group of baboons, which is pretty surprising, considering what he had seen in the past. And another interesting note is that when other baboons, male baboons, came to join the group and tried to behave in ways that were typical with their species, which was to be brutish and try to fight to be alpha, they got smacked down and very quickly had to learn to adapt to this new way of being, which was, chill out, dude. We're all cool. Like, we're fine. Don't worry. And so that was an example of just primate plasticity. You also see it, in the not in the United States, but after World War II, when you had Japan, obviously for many reasons. Were taken away their rights to, go to war in terms of, they could defend themselves but not jump into war with other nations. They outlawed all guns, even swords, because of the Yakuza. And in 2015, they wanted to vote to be able to go back and be able to not only defend themselves, but to enter into, defending other allies. And the parliament, people were protesting. They were insisting that we enjoyed being a pacifist nation. This is the way they wanted to stay. This is the way they do things now. And Parliament actually broke out into a huge fist fight, and it was a big issue. And so this was an example of how humans can also be plastic. Culture changes, and I suggest we do the same. So behavior, we went into a little bit of that, but I want to just talk about, just what our stereotypes of males and females. Males hunt, females gather. Sure, that might happen, yes, but females oftentimes bring in more calories by gathering than those that are hunting. And females actually do hunting themselves, even in non-human primates. I always love to bring up this example. Chimpanzees are known for doing group hunts, and the males, and they will kill colobus monkeys. I call colobus monkeys chimp bait because chimps love to eat them. But they found that females also hunt, but what they do is they break off a twig, find a hollow spot in a tree where they think they might be a bush baby, and just stab it. And voila, bush baby for dinner. So, it's not just exclusive to males. Also, parental investment. A lot of times, again, females do all the, child rearing. In a lot of groups throughout the world, males have a very strong investment, a paternal investment in rearing their children. And so I think that's something that is oftentimes, I know that even when I was growing up, I just remember seeing fathers kind of just pass it off to oh, your mother, oh, let your mother deal with it. But there's a lot of, cultures throughout the world where it's an equal investment in child rearing. Boning, I had to include Stifler's mom, because I get likened to Stifler's mom a lot, which, whatever. But there's this idea that males need to spread their seed, females don't. And they're finding more and more research that actually females have a stronger sex drive than you know, or you might want to know. And that's the thing, is it's a lot of what we're seeing is trying to control females by trying to say, oh, no, they don't like that. And again, a lot of this is culture. When you're raised a certain way, when you're raised to be demure, to not give away your flower, to keep that locked up, that's, you got to take that into consideration. This is me. This is anecdotal evidence. I was a tween smut peddler. I loved trashy novellas. I wrote my own. I loved Land of the Cave Bear and Skinamax movies, and I remember thinking when I was growing up that how could men just be the only one that have the hold on we're the gender that loves sex. It's no. Females love it just as much, or at least that weirdo did. There might be children. Pardon? Oh, I thought I heard something. I would say one of the lines, but I feel like there might be children in the audience, and I don't want to do that. But and also, like I said, infidelity. That's another thing that a book's coming out by Wednesday Martin about. It's called Untrue, and it's about basically the propensity of infidelity in women and why women cheat, and even looking at the biology at what time during their menstruation do they cheat, because there has been studies showing that it's usually when they're ovulating, and they might be going after somebody that potentially has more symmetrical features, idea of being they're better looking, might not be as stable as their partner. So there's some interesting studies there. And also pregnancy sex. I don't know if I haven't had a kid, but there's actually a surge of hormones in second and third trimester where it really increases the sex drive in pregnant women. I did a video for it for Discovery, and I was just floored by all the women that were like, oh yeah, I couldn't stop. And so that also is another example of women are not as coy and demure as we like to assign. And so this is just, I love this gender similarities hypothesis. I just like this one line more than I think. Compared with women, men could throw farther, were physically aggressive, masturbated more, and held more positive attitudes about sex and uncommitted relationships. That was what she deduced, which I thought was an interesting thing to come away with what her idea was. But basically, she said that there was a lot more similarities between the two. And again, one of the things I like to call into question is that even the idea of masturbating more. I feel like a lot of times in culture where women are told to not be as forthright about what we do and are behind closed doors. And so I do call into question some of these studies and some of these surveys and research that maybe women are not being as honest in these surveys because they are, again, taught from an early age that that sort of behavior is not okay. So there's a spectrum of abuse that we're seeing. Microaggressions. I'm sure a lot of you have been on the receiving end of microaggressions, and these can include things like mansplaining. Who here has been mansplained to? I'm sure some of you men have been mansplained to, actually. It happens. Well, actually. I remember I worked for Discovery Digital Networks, and I would make videos on Neanderthals, and I'd get mansplained about why I was saying it wrong. And I was, well, actually, I'm a biological anthropologist, and they actually do say Neanderthal with a hard T. Okay, never mind. I'm just going to walk away. But yeah, I got into fights with one guy that I used fishes because I was describing multiple species of fishes. That one dude actually did it. He was Goofy Noodles 5. He did, it was on YouTube. He eventually apologized because he kept, saying the wrong thing, and I give him a smackdown. There's tone policing. There's this idea that, if you're assertive, you're bossy. If you want something done on time, you're bitchy. There's even like language policing. You say like too much. You have vocal fry. You're being too apologetic. You're being not apologetic enough. We can't win for losing a lot of times being a woman, and that's frustrating. Slut shaming. You're either too prude or you're too promiscuous. There's no like in between. It's like a Goldilocks and the Three Bears. There's mom shaming. Women that have to take care or pick up the kids. They might have to leave work early. Yeah, it's like, well, okay, you don't want me to have kids, you do? Oh yeah, treating stereotypes like scientific fact. There actually was an abstinence training report that basically came back. They were looking at how well abstinence training was working in schools, and they were teaching actually kids stereotypes as scientific fact. Women were looking for men that had resources. Men were looking for women that could help them with domestic services. They actually said this to children. They were teaching them that's what you need to be and provide for a potential spouse. Gaslighting. So if you complain, if women complain about any sort of these other microaggressions, they're oftentimes gaslit and told, well, you're just being too sensitive. Maybe you need to grow a thicker skin. Maybe you need to be more resilient. Maybe you need to just learn to suck it up. And then, of course, wage gap. I don't always get paid as much as my male counterparts. That's not cool. I don't like that one bit. So, and then there's inappropriate comments. I'm sure many of you have also, who's been told inappropriate comments in a workplace setting? Okay, who's been told inappropriate comments at a bar? Yeah, it happens all the time. One of the things I always say, and we'll get to it later, is know your audience. If you don't know the person, maybe you should think not once, not twice, maybe 3 times before you say that mildly inappropriate thing. Because I say inappropriate things. Let me just put that clear, or make that clear. But I make sure I know my audience. If it's a buddy, I can say it. If it's not, zip it up. These are just some, we talked about, obviously female science communicators that were getting harassed or mansplained online. These are just some things that I've had said to me on Discovery videos. Remember how I said I look like Stifler's mom? She looks like Jennifer Coolidge. I get that a lot. But these are actually the more tame ones. I've been told very many things in terms of like, I hope you get RAPED'd because I did a video about race and they didn't like it. I've gotten hate mail. But yeah, I look like a fish. Oh, poor Lacey Green was told that her vagina might have teeth. Things like this that, you can't curate all the comments. But what I saw was the males did not get it on the hosting side at Discovery. They didn't get anything. And what also was even more horrendous is the women of color that hosted for Discovery got it even worse. So again, this is what we're seeing in the troll world. Sexual harassment. So sexual harassment takes it a little bit further. It's either, obviously coming on to somebody, almost sort of like a bartering, like I'll give you this if you give me that. We're finding that basically 81% of women in the United States have experienced some sort of sexual harassment. And it's not just women, you guys. That's the thing. Oh, wait. I was going to do this little experiment. Hold on. I was going to mention that basically also trans Men get sexually harassed too. This is not just about women. This is about everybody who is on the receiving end of harassment. But what I want to just play this little game of, so this is Steve. Hi, Steve. He looks like a nice guy, right? Would you tell Steve that he fills out those jeans real nice? No, right? So why would you tell Sharon in HR? So basically, I want you to do this. Men in the room, picture this guy, Steve. If you want to tell a woman a compliment, maybe at the workplace, think, would you tell this guy Steve? Would Steve appreciate that comment? Steve, you smell real good. Steve, wow, is that a new blouse? I don't know if Steve wears blouses. Steve, did you get your hair done? It's a very lovely, all these little comments that you say that, compliments are good, but compliments that lead to sexualizing, objectifying a woman or where you get it gets sticky. And Steve doesn't look like he wants to get sticky. He looks like a nice guy. And then there's the big one, sexual assault. This is, of course, any sort of, touching that crosses the line. For instance, who here thinks grabbing somebody by the without consent, and is there a child in the room? I don't want to say it if there's a kid in the room. Grabbing somebody right here without consent, is that sexual assault? Yeah, okay. No, I just want to make, I know that seems like a silly question, but apparently, a good portion of the American public didn't think that was enough to keep somebody from being elected. But again, no, that terrifies me. But one of the things that comes with sexual assault that I want to just bring up is the fact that sexual assault is oftentimes, the power differential is whether it's socioeconomic, it's a workplace issue, or it's just brute strength. So I don't know about you, but women in this room, I've been sizing up men since I realized what men were capable of, which was unfortunately very, very young. And so I size men up when I walk down the street. And this is something that I feel like a lot of men don't always know, and maybe you do. But that's something that, when you talk to the women in your life, men out there, talk to them about this, because there's a lot of sizing up, there's a lot of crossing the street, there's a lot of thinking twice before leaving the house at a certain time at night, things that you don't think about when you walk through the world. There's an extra layer, an extra mask we have to wear. And so this was a very sad and interesting fact that the United States actually tied with Syria when women were talking about sexual assault, and the most, where they feared sexual assault the most, they tied third place with Syria. So we're seeing the United States is not as civilized or peaceful as we'd like to think. It's got a ways to go. And we also found that, this is not a exactly new stat, but every 98 seconds somebody is sexually assaulted. And this does not necessarily mean it's women, it's trans, it's people from the trans community, men as well. And this actually was very jarring, that in the transgender community, they found that roughly 47% had endured some sort of sexual assault. And so that's something that I think really needs to be considered in this Me Too movement, and they should not be lost to just solely looking at women. And then just more sexual, yay, this is the most exciting, fun part of the talk, yay, sexual violence. So 1 in 5 women, 1 in 71 men will have some sort of rape in their life. So that's a staggering amount. Imagine 20% of the people, women you know, has gone through a horrendous experience like rape. And imagine the trauma that goes with it. And the more we're understanding about even epigenetics and how trauma early on in one's life is carried on and affects gene expression in the future, this is something that I think there's a lot more research needed in this particular category, honestly. And so there's a lot of misconceptions about sexual assault. I won't go through all of them, but you can read them at will. But there's a lot of victim shaming when you drink too much, when you wear the wrong outfit. Let's face it, I don't know if you guys, and this is going to be one of my suggestions at the end, who here has seen Nanette? Right? Hannah Gadsby kills it. I don't know if you guys have Netflix, I highly, highly recommend watching it. It's heartbreaking, it's beautiful. It's one of those things you watch and you're like, the first 30 minutes, you're like, I don't quite get it. And then all of a sudden, the last 30 minutes, you're like, oh God, I need to sit down. Can we pause? I might need a drink. Woo, it's heavy, but at the same time, it's a conversation that needs to be had, especially about being a woman. And she identifies as not gender normal. And so this idea of like only women that are dressed really hot and wearing a short skirt are the ones that are going to be assaulted. Not true. We know that that is completely bullshit, and it's victim shaming, and it's bullshit. So again, there's a lot of people that say, why don't women speak up more? Why don't we actually say things right when it happens? Well, we're told from a very early age, and this is not news, and I apologize, I feel like a lot of this talk is like women are like, oh, this is not news, I know this. But men, we are told very early on to take it on the chin, buck up, grow a thick skin, pick and choose your battles. I had a great talk with a friend of mine last night, Kyle, wherever you may be, if you're in the audience, about just how people have to pick and choose their battles, especially people of color, because they're constantly fighting a battle. It's like, I was harassed by a dude at work. Do I want to say something, or do I want to get that promotion? You really have to pick and choose, and that's not fair. That really is not. So that's something I think you should know. And so what I'm also seeing, unfortunately, in response to the Me Too movement is a lot of men saying, I don't know how to talk to women. I don't know how to date. I don't want to take on a female student. I actually have met academics that will not take on a female student. And that is so ass backwards, as if we're somehow like going to just ruin them. We're just like a walking time bomb, walking into their office, ready to just explode, Me Too all over them. No, this is a time when women, more than any time, need mentorship, need people like on their side, helping them out. And so, this idea of like just, oh, I don't want to mentor a woman. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Oh, you feel uncomfortable. Imagine what we have to go through every day in life, smile. Hey babe, like walking down the street, even last night walking home from the social, yeah, I got a few little comments that were like, that's really inappropriate. I'm just gonna keep on walking. So I mean, for the few moments you're uncomfortable, maybe with a comment or like seeing her in a short skirt or whatever, it's like the world of uncomfortable that she deals with her day-to-day life it far exceeds that. So maybe just get out of yourself for a second and get uncomfortable and help somebody. Yeah, and the thing is, I think, again, we can change. We're plastic. We're very plastic. And this again, oh yeah, so it's making dating so hard. Like, where's the line? I don't know. How about not raping? Like, just maybe just ask, consent. But this is but again, I don't want to like downplay it because this is a good question. If guys literally don't know what to do, let's have the discussion. Let's talk. And I have some ideas, and I'm going to get to in a little bit about how we can be better about even dating. Solutions. So again, think before speaking, acting, touching. If you don't know somebody, think about it 3 or 4 times. If you know them, but you're like, I'm not sure, maybe just be a little bit more cautious. Choose your words wiser. When it comes to seeing something, if you see someone getting harassed, looking uncomfortable, maybe it makes you uncomfortable, but just imagine for a second you're in their shoes and just be like, hey, are you okay? Or say something. Or if it's a dangerous situation, call somebody. But it's like being in the subway, or being in the airport, you see a package that looks like it could be a bomb, you're not going to just leave it there. You're not going to let it explode. You're not going to risk the lives of others. Why would you do that with somebody who is clearly going through something right in front of your face? And men, unfortunately, we live in a time that unless a man oftentimes corroborates a story or says, oh yeah, I was there, I saw it, that happened, people don't believe. We're very quick to be like, oh, well, I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen all the facts. And I get it. You don't want to convict people without really knowing if it really happened. But sometimes it's just 2 people in a room. And listen to victims. So, and again, know your audience. Think of Steve. If you're in an office setting and you're talking to somebody that is a subordinate, just maybe think twice before you say something that is, oh, Carol, that blouse really accents all your best features, things like that just might seem benign, but kind of come off as like, well, I don't know if I really wanted to hear that from you, boss person. Not really what I was looking for today. And then for me, I guess, teaching your children, especially boys, because the thing is, and girls actually, teach your girls to just live, and your boys to respect them. Because the thing is, we're all human, and we don't know exactly how we're going to turn out, especially in terms of where you are in the gender spectrum. But respect everyone, like just everyone, even the jerks in the world, unless they're, unless they're doing harm to somebody, you just have to respect people and show, I mean, again, it's a Nazi, I'm not one of those people that's like, no, don't punch the Nazi. It's, you can punch the Nazi. Please punch the Nazi. We had people fighting in World War II for that right. So, but respecting people is very important. Okay, so I was talking, I'm dating someone, and I was talking last night about just this whole talk, and how consent is interesting, because obviously when you're in a sexy time situation, it's like, oh, may I please touch your left breast? Doesn't come off very sexy, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe it does, like maybe you're into that, but like for me, it's like, hey, you like that? How about that? Talk to them, like turn it into sexy talk, find that way. Like, watch maybe a few blue movies and get there. Yes, I just told you to watch some porn. And please do not blame science or biology on, or blame bad behavior on science and biology. It's not science and biology's fault. It might be culture's fault. It might be your parents' fault. It might be, what you saw on TV's fault, but it most likely is just your fault. Most likely just you. Let's just face it. Personal responsibility for bad behavior, I think, is key in this particular situation. So, and my friend actually wrote a book called The Consent Guidebook, dealing with how do we get consent properly. Her name's Erin Tillman. She's awesome, so that's a great book. A lot of sex experts and sexologists and psychologists actually help inform this book. Again, Hannah Gadsby's Nanette, as far as just really cutting deep into what women have to deal with on the day-to-day, I think is a great example of something everyone should watch. And it's also very funny, funnier probably than I could ever be, and she's just incredibly charming. So again, thank you so much, and I just hope everyone is kind to one another. And I want to open it up if you, I don't know how much time I have. Okay, okay, do you need, okay. Cool. Oh, I do? Okay, does anyone have questions about, thank you.
Hi. I liked what you said about the baboons, that being a violent dick is not adaptive, and what you said about we shouldn't look for cultural explanations that violence is good. An odd thing, though, Steve Novella last night was telling me that we evolved violence because the violent people selectively killed off the nonviolent ones. So I wondered, would you be able to have a talk with him about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, want to come on out? Yeah, I would love that. That's an interesting point, but I feel like, I don't know about you, but has anyone in here killed anyone? This is what I get for asking that question. My point being is, they didn't kill everybody. We're still, I mean, I don't know about you, but I have pretty pacifist views, to an extent. So, I don't know if that's true.
Thank you very much. When I was in high school in the 60s, boys went to shop, and in other words, woodworking, metalworking. The girls went to home economics to learn how to sew and iron and cook. And a class ahead of me was unruly and were punished. And the punishment was they made the boys go to home economics, and they made the girls go to shop to humiliate them. The result was so surprising, it transformed the entire school.
Really?
And the shock, I think, of the white males that ran it suppressed it. It never happened again. So it made me wonder if there were studies where role-playing or changing, in other words, having men dress as women and women dress as men, could be a transformative experience.
That would be, yeah, I don't see why not. I'm trying to think of, I mean, I know that, role-playing and in certain schools, I know that, I'm trying to think of examples that I've dealt with, but I just love that happens in terms of like just shake things up. It's something so simple as just, why is men baking like, oh God, whoa, I don't know if I can handle that. Women, changing oil is something unheard of. And from then on out, I'm just curious, did they do co-ed? No. They just, oh, that was it? It was just one time? Oh, interesting. Yeah, I probably could have used some home ec, honestly. I'm the worst domestic goddess in the whole entire world. I could probably have used some shop, honestly. But yeah, this whole sort of gender role and assigning roles at a very early age, I think, is incredibly detrimental. And it's something that I feel like, that's why with biological anthropology, there's a big shift. It's easy to go, we're just a biological species. We do things because of what our genes tell us to do, but a lot of what our genes have become has been very much influenced by our environment and our culture. So that's something that we cannot ever forget. We can't strip away the fact that culture affects our behavior day in and day out. Everything that we do is affected by what we've learned from a very early age. And it can change, but at the same time, it's hard to separate those two. And when you try to, I think your science fails. Your science is weaker if you just completely ignore that there is some factor of culture and environment.
Hi there. You started off the talk by saying there are situations where you just didn't know right away what to say, what to do. And I had a situation. I was wondering if you could help me out.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was on a crosstown city bus. The bus was extremely crowded. All the seats were taken. I was standing up in the middle of the aisle. This woman came on, and she looked like she was overburdened. She was carrying a heavy bag, and she just wasn't quite making it. So at one stop, suddenly some people got up. And there were 2 empty seats, so I tapped her on the shoulder, and I pointed to the empty seats. She immediately turned around and shouted so that everybody on the bus could hear, "Get your fucking hands off me, don't touch me, don't go near me, you're absolutely terrible, you're trash." So, so I didn't know what to say, so I waited a second, I tried to say something, she said, "Do not say a word. All you should say is, I'm sorry, I don't want to hear another word." I didn't know what to do.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, yeah. It's like no act of kindness comes without some sort of punishment, for real. In that circumstance like that, it sounds. I mean, oh God. People have personalities that you can't strip away. Touching is tough because you don't know what her background is. I mean, if she's somebody who's not mentally well, because it sounds like her reaction might have been caused by either a really, really bad day or years and years of some sort of psychological issues. But in a situation like that, I think you did the nice thing. You tried to help. I mean, all you could do is just try to say you're sorry. I think, personally, I don't know about the rest of the room, but I do that on the subway, and I've never gotten that response, and I'm sorry you did, because I'll do that. I'll point out a seat or something like that and say, here you go. But I guess touching in the future, just maybe try to, ma'am. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of, but I'm sorry that you had that sort of reaction. I think you did a kind thing.
Okay, over here.
Oh.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi.
So I think that with, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna run into a question.
No, it's okay. Don't worry.
I'm getting there. I'm gonna try and keep it short. But I think that the Me Too movement at this point is also an opportunity to teach.
Yeah.
I don't feel like we can expect the same society, the same culture that has created all these jackasses of both genders to just suddenly, by telling them, teach your children respect, teach your children to be kind, I don't think that's going to be enough. I think the movement itself maybe should have an offshoot or some kind of guidance to provide parents and provide people knowledge of, I mean, even here we have questions on how to deal with certain things. And it can be confusing and it can be overwhelming the same way it is overwhelming for you to walk down the street every day and, and be whistled at and all that. It's understandable, and I'd be frustrated too. So my question is, do you think that maybe the movement itself can be used as a tool for learning?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. I think, I know Toronto Burke is doing a lot of fundraising, more specifically to target global victims of sexual assault. But also I know that she wants the movement, because there have been strong opponents that did not agree with the movement, that think it's gone too far, and she's saying, of course, in response, it has not gone far enough, because it's still happening. And so I do think it's a teachable moment and a time when we should be supplying parents and also teachers and curriculums in school from that's the thing, is I think from a very early age, talking to kids about how there isn't a very big difference between with genders, and that we should stop genderizing kids so young. But I feel like supplying parents and teachers with those tools. This is a very sad story, but recently a friend of mine, her daughter is 13 years old. She's going to public school in Los Angeles, very liberal, Culver City, a liberal town, and she's taking sex ed, and the teacher that's teaching is a science teacher. He's not even a sex ed teacher. And he told the students that if a girl gets pregnant, the man should do the right thing and marry her. And abstinence is the way to go. End of story. No contraception, no talk about like condoms or birth control, that's it. And thank goodness my friend's daughter came to her and said, hey, this is what I was told. And the mom called up the school and went up the ranks and was like, this is unacceptable. Like, we're gonna have kids that are gonna be pregnant by 15 if we're telling them abstinence works, and then all of a sudden you have to marry the girl? Like, what is this, 1950? We're doing ourselves a disservice. I just wrote actually an article for CFI about abortion and just about the CPCs that are out there, and just all the misinformation that we're giving young women about their own health that are going to sort of entrap them into a life that they didn't want. I feel like there's sort of, right now we're dealing with like kind of a war against women and information that they deserve that will benefit their health. So not only do we need to teach parents to, teach their kids to be better to each other, but also just teach how women can have opportunities by not getting pregnant, because people will have sex, right? People do it, right? Right? They're gonna do it, so.
Okay, in our day-to-day lives, we're all either targets or perpetrators of microaggressions, probably most of the time without realizing it. So if we are the target of a microaggression, what would be an appropriate way to educate the person without coming across as hostile?
That's a really good question, because just like the man in front of you, it's the same sort of idea of like, how do you like, deal with the situation that's uncomfortable? In my personal experience, say for instance, if someone's interrupting me, oh God, I had someone actually literally steal an idea from me. I had pitched an idea and he turned around and he pitched it in front of me to somebody else, the same idea, and my eyes were like, and instead of calling him out in the moment, I called out the actual aggression and said, I pitched that a year ago, and the woman said, oh yeah, I remember that, you did. But as far as when I dealt with him later, I did kind of like, I know what you did, and that wasn't okay, and you need to, respect my intellectual property and not do that. In terms of interrupting is a big problem. I don't know if you deal with that a lot, constant interrupting by men. And women too, but I'll make it very clear, hey, excuse me, I haven't finished my thought yet, will you please let me finish my thought? In terms of mansplaining, that can get tricky. But I will tell somebody, like, I beg your pardon, but you've just mansplained me, and I really don't appreciate that. So I call it out right there as much as I can. When it's harassment, and things of that sort, it's a little bit, it's trickier. Like I said, when I was dealing, yeah. Oh, yeah. I would say also, if it's in a public setting, like say if it's a meeting, wait till after the meeting and then talk to them. Because if you do it in front of people, then it becomes like they're humiliated. Yeah. So I would definitely say that the power differential, if it's, yeah, I would definitely take the time in privacy.
Last one, Natalia.
Okay. Hi.
Hello. So regarding the power differential, I've heard people say that a woman can't give consent even if she says yes because of the power differential. And I think that with that kind of thing, we're losing some people who might have been allies to the movement. So I don't know if you've heard that or have, like how would you argue that?
I don't like that because it takes away my agency. I'm like, yeah, because yeah, I don't like that one bit. I mean, I get it because, again, like we were talking about when I mentioned the whole I size people up, because yeah, I mean, sometimes it's brute power. Like if I'm with someone who's 6'5" and I give consent, like, do I really have a choice in the matter? But I do. You know, that's also taking away their agent. It's also assuming that they don't have any sort of restraint, which I think is also a disservice to both people. And I don't agree with that. But I definitely, yeah, and that, yeah, that's getting a little too, I think, postmodern, you know, for this critique of like, I don't know, do women have agency? Yeah, I feel like women do have the ability to give consent. But I also think that we're still figuring out what consent is, because consent isn't being passed out and not being able to make words, or you know what I mean, like, because I've heard plenty of times of like, oh, she didn't say no. I'm like, she was asleep. That doesn't count, and that is not okay. But yeah, I think women can give consent. I don't know how to. I haven't met somebody who actually said that to me though, like with that belief. So I'm trying to think of what I would say to somebody in that situation, other than, you know, don't strip me of my agency. Thank you.